Hello, in our previous lectures, we briefly talked about the prerequisite programs, which includes good agricultural practices, good manufacturing practices, and good hygienic practices. So now in this lecture, we are going to discuss about good agricultural practices. Good agricultural practices are practices that ensure environmental, economical, and social sustainability for on-farm practices and post-production practices, resulting in safe and quality food and non-food agricultural products. This tells us that good agricultural practices mainly aims at producing safe and healthy foods, and this can be achieved by addressing environmental, social, and economic considerations in a sustainable manner. That's why we said that the overall intention of good agricultural practices is to address environmental, social, and economic considerations in a sustainable manner in the production of safe and healthy foods. And the implementation of good agricultural practices is a joint responsibility of the enterprise, farmer, manager, and workers. In other words, it means that it requires teamwork so that the food which is being produced from the farm is the one which is safe and healthy. The benefits of good agricultural practices includes it builds good farm reputation. This is as a result of the production of safe and healthy foods. Then it also results into better quality, and when better qualities of food products are realized, it faces higher price and hence higher income for the farmer. Good agricultural practices also results into production of safe, healthy, and good quality food products, which in turn improves human nutrition. It results in the production of products which stands a higher chance of accessing new markets. That means it makes the product to be more competitive in the market since it is safe and suitable for consumption. Then good agricultural practices also enables workers to be healthy, safe, and know their work in the farm. And this makes them to always be motivated in doing their work. Good agricultural practices also minimizes confusion and risks. This is because the workers will know their work with regards to food safety and sanitation and then prevention of contamination and so on. Then good agricultural practices embraces the use of improved methods, and these improved methods leads to the higher yields in the crops. And since there's a higher yield, that means that there will be increased income for the farmer. And this improved method also reduces waste and losses of food. Then it also improves sustainability. Let's then look at the good agricultural practices implementation points. When we want to implement good agricultural practices, there are specific points where we can implement. And one of the points where we can implement good agricultural practices is land. And under the land, we are going to emphasize more about the knowledge of the land, the farmer knowing the land, then preventing land contamination, and then how we can prepare the soil. Then the next implementation point that we are going to look at is water, whereby we shall discuss mainly about irrigation and managing water use. The next point is crop. Under this, we are going to talk more about how we can handle and protect crops. Fertilizers and agrochemicals. Here we are mainly going to look at how we can apply these fertilizers and agrochemicals, and then how we are going to protect our food products from getting contaminated with these agrochemicals and fertilizers. Then animals, basically we shall be looking at pest control under this pest control, and then we shall also discuss more about the health, access, and then protection of food from these uh, animals. Then we shall look at the workers, whereby we shall talk about the working conditions, worker protection, amenities, worker training, and then hygiene. Then also the next implementation point for good agricultural practices is the harvest and transportation. And under this mainly, we are going to discuss about how we can prevent contamination and how we can preserve the freshness of the food products. Then lastly, the point of implementation of good agricultural practices is during traceability, which can also be referred to as one step forward and one step backward. And this involves record keeping so that we can trace uh, the food products. Then we can now then discuss about how can we implement the good agricultural practices. We said that there are various points where we can implement the good agricultural practices. And say one of the point is workers. So under this, we have working conditions. So the workers who are working in the enterprise or in the farm, so we should make sure that they are being given work contracts, and these work contracts will contain the legal conditions of the work, and they will have to be paid, and the payment should be followed. Then, because this one here makes the workers to be motivated in doing their work, and hence they will be in position of producing safe and healthy foods. Then children should not be allowed to work on the farm. This will enable them to be given ample time to attend to their studies, though they can be given some other light work to they can help in other field work during their free time, but we should ensure that it doesn't interfere with their studies. Then also the workers have to be trained on food safety so that they will know what they are supposed to do in order to keep the food products safe. Then also they have to be trained about personal hygiene so that they don't contaminate the food as they are handling them during production. Then also they should have to be trained on good agricultural practices so that the food product that they are producing are the one which are safe and healthy. Then they have to also be trained on how to handle agrochemicals and fertilizers, and also they have to be trained on how to prevent contamination and deterioration during the food handling from the farm. Then each worker should know their job and have the knowledge and skills to carry out their job. And this one here can be achieved through training, worker protection. So under this, we should always make sure that the the health of the workers are always monitored, and we can do this by periodically doing medical checkup or assessment, and then also we should ensure that we give them healthy certificate after undergoing the medical checkups. This will help us to always know which worker is sick, so that when a sick worker or a worker who is diseased will not be allowed to handle foods in the process of food production to avoid contamination. Then there has to also be first aid kit, and this first aid kit must be well stocked uh, to treat minor injuries that the workers might get in the due process of food production. Then there has to be emergency phone numbers, and these emergency phone numbers should be clearly displayed so that all the workers can have access to it. This will help them to contact uh, the necessary people or individuals for help when the need arises. Amenities also still under the workers as the implementation point. Uh, the facilities or the farm or the enterprise or the place where the food is being produced from, there has to be always hand washing facilities and toilets. And these hand washing facilities and toilets should be sufficient in a number. And then they have to be in clean and good conditions. They should be easily accessible and ventilated to allow free circulation of air to avoid producing bad smells or odors. Then the hand washing facility or the toilets should be fitted with doors that can be closed, and also should be equipped with troughs for collecting the rubbish and toilet paper and then wash basins. Then the other amenities is there has to be potable water. By this we mean a potable water is the water which can be used for drinking, because it is free of hazards or contaminants that can cause food related diseases. So there has to be potable water, and then there has to be soap for washing hands and utensils and doing other sanitary activities. Then there has to be towels for drying or cleaning our hands or the body. Then the water must be clean without odors, and then not allowed to stagnate so that it will not act as a breeding place for other organisms, or so that it doesn't produce bad smell. Then the water must be stored in clean containers to avoid contamination. Then always consider chlorination or boiling of water if the water is got from unsafe sources or untrusted sources. They have to be treated by chlorination or by boiling, or you can do filtration. Then also still under the workers, you have to put emphasis on the worker hygiene. Workers must maintain good personal cleanness so that the food products that they are handling will not be contaminated. Then wash hands every time after using toilets and before handling a produce. This is still to prevent contamination of the food products. Then workers will not be allowed to handle food if they are suffering from infectious diseases, because some of these infectious diseases are communicable through foods, water, and hence if uh, someone who is having the pathogen or the disease, and then this person handles the food unhygienically, then the food will get contaminated with these pathogens, and hence making the food unsafe for consumption. Then smoking, eating, chewing gums will not be allowed in production or processing areas to avoid contamination. Then spitting, sneezing, and coughing on the produce will be prohibited. This is also to avoid contamination, transfer of pathogens, and so on. Then personal effects like jewelry, watches should not be allowed into the food producing area, because once they accidentally or intentionally uh, gets into the food, they can cause physical injuries to the consumers. Then cuts and wounds must be covered with a dressing. This is also to avoid contamination. Adequate protective clothing and footwear must be used during the time of production from the farm. Then the next implementation point is land. So whenever a farmer is choosing a land for producing food, he or she must have the knowledge about the land. So he or she should make sure that uh, he knows the field is surrounding, and should be informed of the past and the present usage of the land, so that he or she will be in position of knowing uh, what type of crops can be planted there. Then also, do not use land adjacent to chemicals, industrial effluent treatment, or other such facilities from where toxin may leach into your land. So you make sure that the land which you are choosing for food production should be the one which is not next to industries or chemicals, because once the waste which are released from these industries or the chemical which are being released can leach into your land, and hence it can contaminate the food product that will be produced from the farm, because some of the food crops, they can absorb these chemicals, especially the heavy metals, and once they get in the food, they make the food unsafe for consumption. Then you have to verify microbiological and chemical contamination of soil through laboratory analysis. This one here can be done by a specialist who knows about how to analyze soil using from the laboratory. So you can hire technicians or the specialists who can do that, so that you know the microbiological and chemical contamination that may that are likely to be caused in your food. Then you have to recognize more fertile land and with the availability of water. So you need to get a land which is fertile, and the one which is having water. Be acquainted with the types of pests, diseases, and weeds in the crop area. Then you have to evaluate the access of animals to your land. Signpost the place where the crop will be planted. Plan out your site ahead, such as the waste disposal area. You have to designate it. Then the storage facility, toilets, washroom, agrochemical mixing area, and then animal cells. This is to avoid contamination in future before the food produce are realized. Then toilets and washrooms should not contaminate the fields. Plan for separate storage of produce, tools and equipment, chemicals, and waste disposal. This is to avoid crossing contamination or contaminating the food with pathogens. Then you have to also check for flooding and waterlogging in rainy season and at other times of the year so that you can plan. Then evaluate access to transportation and infrastructure so that once the produce are out, you can transport it to the markets. Then how can we prevent contamination of land? Do not plant in the fields that are or may have been chemically, biologically contaminated. The fields should be free of trash, paper, cardboard, plastic, empty containers which could harbor pests. Then check that there is no risk of water contamination so that the water becomes potable. Check absence of sources of contamination from neighboring plots, e.g. fecal, chemical, and so on. Then when you have already you have the knowledge about the land and you have followed all the proceedings for preventing contamination of that land, then you can go ahead and now prepare the soil for planting. And once you are during the preparation process, you have to analyze the type of soil and its depth for good growth of the roots. Have to know the type of soil because there are other soils which support growth, and also whether the soil can allow the depth of for good growth of the roots. Then you have to work with the support of a technician you trust because so it is these technicians who have the knowledge of analyzing the soil. Then consider the slope of the field where planting will be done. Avoid soil erosion and compression, and this one here can be done by using contour planting. Then we have contour plowing, then we have terracing, and then strip cropping. Then you can also practice crop rotation, avoid tilling the soil always to same depth to avoid soil compression, and also change position of planting beds periodically. So that is it with the implementation point, which is land. So the next good agricultural practices implementation point is water. Under here we are going to discuss about irrigation and water use. So you have to identify the sources of water and test for contamination and quality of water for irrigation, because not all water are good for irrigation. When the water is contaminated with chemicals, then it will be unsafe for the plants. So you don't have to use water which is contaminated. That's why we say you first need to test the water for contamination. And then also you have to get the water from good sources. Then identify frequency of testing based on source of water and risk of contamination. How frequently are you going to test the water to find out whether uh, it is contaminated or not? Will depend on the source of the water. Then do not irrigate in excess. Use only required amount of water for the crops. Then do not use contaminated water for irrigation. Keep water flow channels free of rubbish so that the water will not remain stagnant but rather flow freely. Use the irrigation methods recommended for your crops. Maybe the recommendation from the technician or a specialist. You have to always follow when you are irrigating. Then pay attention to quality of water sprayed directly, especially to exposed or edible parts of the produce. Then you should have knowledge about how you prevent water contamination from the farm. You have to avoid entry or access of animals, birds, pests to the water source because once they get there, they can release their excreta, fecal matter, urinate, and then hence contaminating the water. Protect water tanks and irrigation channel free of animals and birds to avoid the contamination. Do not store mixed agrochemicals or apply this near water sources because they can easily get into the water, and once they get into the water becomes contaminated. Do not clean sprayers and equipment used for agrochemicals near water sources to avoid the contamination. Then the next good agricultural practices implementation point is crops. And we know for us when we talk about crops, we have to know what seeds are because it is from these seeds that we get the plants or the crops. So how we choose these seeds or how we select this seed for planting or sowing is very important. There are other practices that we have to embrace whenever we are selecting seeds for planting or sowing. We have to always use seeds that are certified and have been analyzed for sanitary conditions. Use seeds that can adapt to the soil of the field and suited to the conditions of the region. Or else, if this is not done, the seed will fail to germinate because the condition maybe around that region is not favorable to such a seed. So you have to know before you select. Then select improved seeds and resistant to the most frequent diseases. Select healthy seedlings and discard feeble and diseased seeds. Then develop practices to eliminate pests and diseases from the seeds. Select an adequate sowing date, avoiding droughts because when there is no water in the soil, imbibition will not take place and hence germination also cease to occur. So at an adequate distance. This is to reduce competition after germination. Uh, place rubbish bins at appropriate zones to throw the rubbish into at the end of each day. So you have to have rubbish bins or pits at designated appropriate zones in the field so that rabbits can be poured in them at the end of each day work. Then we have to also protect our crops, and here we have to protect seed beds from the sun and heavy rains because the seedlings are delicate or are vulnerable to heavy rains and sun. That's why we have to protect the seed beds. Take measures to obtain a good control of temperature and humidity in greenhouses. Then you have to control temperatures, humidity, and wind, considering the season and needs of the crop. Because some crops they grow well in low temperatures, and others grow well in areas regions with a high temperature. So then the next point of implementing good agricultural practices is fertilizers, pesticides, and agrochemicals. When we want to apply fertilizers, pesticides, and agrochemicals in order to improve the yield of our crops, we have to take the following into we have to put the following into consideration before we apply these agrochemicals or pesticides or the fertilizers. First, you have to know the weeds, pests, and diseases endemic to the area or region so that you apply appropriate pesticides or agrochemicals or fertilizers. Then analyze the possibility of applying biological controls instead of chemical ones because the chemical controls have got effects to our health, but the biological control are safer. So if there's a possibility of you applying a biological control, then you have to do it instead of using chemical controls. Then consult a technician for recommended agrochemicals and in accordance with the pests, diseases, and weeds affecting your crops. Though you have to always consult the technicians so that they give you agrochemicals that are recommended or those ones which are appropriate to the pests or diseases or the weeds that is affecting your crops in the farm. Then you have to use agrochemicals that are registered in your country because if you don't do that, that means your food product will stand a higher chance of being rejected in the domestic market. And then if the food product is to be exported to other countries, that means you have to also know the agrochemicals that are used in such countries so that you use them. And hence your food product will be accepted by those countries. Then use fertilizers that are free from toxic substances, especially heavy metals, because the heavy metals can be absorbed by some of the plants, and once they are absorbed and we eat them, they can cause adverse health effects to humans in the long run. Then avoid chemical contamination of groundwater with nitrates or fertilizers. Consult with a technician or expert to define the amount of nutrients required at different stages of growth, the time, quantity, and spots or areas on the plant that should receive the spray or avoid the spray. Then you have to read the label to verify you have all the necessary equipment and tools for applying the fertilizers or the pesticide or the agrochemicals. Then verify the use by date. Never use expired agrochemicals because they will be less effective and also uh, can contaminate the food products. Write down the application details when you have applied it, which part of the plant, the quantity you use, and so on. All should be documented for future reference or traceability. Then respect the waiting time between applications as it has been as it is recommended by the technician or as it is indicated on the labels of the fertilizers or agrochemicals. Then cordon of the area being sprayed or place danger or poison signs so that people can clearly see. Persons, children, and animals will not be allowed to access the sprayed area because some of these chemicals are harmful to humans and other animals as well. Then let's now look at the application and spraying of the fertilizers and agrochemicals. Spraying should be done only by trained and experienced workers. Follow precisely the manufacturer's instructions. Sprayers should be calibrated to control the accuracy of rate of application. Then apply only the dose required as recommended. Do not apply more than is necessary to avoid contamination of water and soil. Water used for spraying should not be contaminated. Write down the application of fertilizers, chemicals being done, their dose, say the quantity, their concentration, date, and person applying for easier traceability. Do not enter spraying area immediately after application. Observe crops periodically for timely detection of any problems so that if a problem arises from the application of a particular agrochemicals, you know what to do. Then protecting against the exposure, we have to children, women, pregnant women, and old age person must not be anywhere near where agrochemicals are being mixed or applied because they are vulnerable to the harms which can be caused by inhaling or through getting contact with these agrochemicals. Then mix the agrochemicals only with an inert containers like plastic and not metals that can react or corrode or rust. So whenever we are mixing, the containers that we are using for mixing should be the one which is not reactive with the chemicals to avoid unnecessary reaction that can occur and result into harm of the person who is mixing. Then use protective gears like face masks, eye protection lenses, rubber gloves, boots, waterproof suits while mixing and applying. Avoid spraying during windy periods. After completion of application, the worker should shower and wash all the protection elements at a place away from potable and irrigation water sources and the field. So you have to wash it far away. It should be away from the field, the water sources, which are the water sources for irrigation, and then uh, it has to be away from potable water to avoid contamination of the water and also the products that are being produced from the field or from the farm. Storage and handling. So the agrochemicals must be stored in a separate facility and not with tools, equipment, seeds, or harvested produce to avoid contamination. Then they have to be placed out of reach of children and animals and limit access to only relevant workers to prevent harm. The store from where the agrochemicals are stored must be locked, secure, fresh, and ventilated for easy air circulation. Should be locked so that people don't access it anyhow for security reasons. The store should be well lit and with appropriate facility for carrying out the measurement and mixing. Because if we mix uh, or measure the agrochemicals in a place which is not well lit, a dim place, we shall not be able to measure appropriately or mix it properly. Then have to store the pesticides in their original package and do not mix different pesticides, especially the old ones with the new ones. Place warning signs, e.g. poison, no smoking, and so on. Avoid spillage and splashing while mixing. In case of any accident, seek medical assistance immediately. Fertilizers, and the fertilizers here mainly besides the chemicals, we use organic, we also use organic manure. And whenever we want to use the organic manure during the time of uh, food production from the farm, we have to first of all analyze if it is possible to use organic manure. Then wrong use of manure is one of the main sources of contamination. To eliminate pathogen, we have to adopt proper treatment procedures, e.g. composting, pasteurization, heat drying, ultraviolet irradiation, alkali digestion, sun drying, of a combination of this or a combination uh, of this. So as we are applying the organic manure, we should always ensure that the it doesn't promote or encourage contamination of both water and the food products. And we can do that by eliminating, or if we can ensure that by always eliminating pathogens through proper treatment procedures, e.g. pasteurization and so on. Then also where possible, we have to obtain documentation from the supplier that identify the origin, treatment used, tests performed, and then results obtained. Then we have to minimize direct or indirect contact of manure, biosolids, and other natural fertilizers with the crop, and especially those ones which are close to harvest, because the direct contact or indirect contact of the manure with these products can contaminate the products. Use only stabilized manure. Use only manure with previous composting treatment. Always apply organic manure before planting the crops. Manure should be prepared in places far away from the crop area and water sources. Then when we have used the fertilizer or the agrochemicals, we have to ensure that we will dispose the empty containers of these chemicals or fertilizers in a proper way. So we have to always ensure that we empty containers after when we have washed thrice with the water. Okay, so we have to always uh, make sure that we wash the empty containers thoroughly before we use it for other uses. Then we have to always use gloves when we are dealing with these containers because they contain chemicals. Waste water, waste water should not mix with drinking or working water to avoid cross contamination. Then empty containers should not be reused again. Break or perforate the container so that they cannot be used again. Because once it is not broken or perforated, people may be tempted to use it unknowingly. Then keep the washed and perforated container in a closed bag to avoid incineration or burning. Then the next good agricultural implementation point is animals. We verify that the animals for work are healthy because during the sometimes from the farm we use animals for cultivating the land. Always when we are using such animals, we make sure that they are healthy. Sometimes even these animals can be used for weeding. So we always have to make sure that those animals are the ones which are healthy so that they don't cause food contamination as a result of transfer of pathogens from them to the food products. Animals on the farm should be fed correctly, hygienically, and have fresh water for drinking. They should be correctly housed in an enclosed space with adequate space so that they don't release their excretors anyhow. Animals should not have access to the field or storage areas. All workers should be informed that no animals can be brought in. And then you can use sign posts to create awareness. Then the next implementation point is harvests. During harvest, we have to prevent contamination, and we can ensure that by ensuring that during the time of harvesting, workers must have clean hands, clipped nails, which are clean, and then they should ensure that their hairs are tied to avoid physical contamination. Then this is the clean hands prevents biological contamination. Eating food, smoking, drinking, chewing are not allowed on the field during harvest. Only freshly picked produce will be used. Produce that fell off the plant earlier must not be included in the harvest because there is a possibility of them carrying pathogens which could cause cross contamination when mixed with the fresh products. Avoid brushing or knocking of products because once their tester or cover breaks, there's a possibility of microorganisms entering into the products to cause contamination. Only use clean tools, e.g., scissors, knives, pruning shears to avoid contamination. Then tables and workplace surfaces must always be clean. Equipment should be in good working conditions and maintained hygienically for food safety and also consistency and efficiency in the production of food. Use freshly washed and clean containers to avoid contamination. The produce and the containers should come in contact with soil, or dirty surface do not come into contact with the soil or dirty surfaces. Do not use containers that previously contained any chemicals or fertilizers for collecting the uh, food products. Containers and equipment must be made of non-toxic material and of a design that allows easy cleaning and maintenance. Water used to rinse produce Water used to rinse produce, if needed, should be potable quality, free of contaminants, free of hazards. Store packaging materials hygienically so that they don't get contaminated. Then also during the point of harvesting, we have to also maintain freshness of the product, and we can ensure that by placing the harvested produce in shadows away from animals, stored chemicals and fertilizers so that they don't get contaminated with the animal excreta, the chemicals and then the fertilizer. Storage must be in a clean and covered area free of dust where pests cannot enter. Store at appropriate temperature and humidity. Use clean and appropriate packaging material so that the product or the produce remains fresh. And then the next implementation point is transportation. During transportation, we have to maintain good hygiene and health while loading and unloading containers with the produce. Then load must be covered to protect against rain, sun, dust and sources of contamination during transport, e.g. smoke, fumes from other animals. That's why we have to always cover them. The vehicle used to transport produce should preferably be used only for this purpose. And if you want to use it for other purposes, or if you have used it for other purpose before you use it for transporting produce, you must ensure that you clean it thoroughly and you have to dry it before using it for transporting the produce. Then do not transport animals, chemicals, equipment, or people with the produce. No, you don't have to mix them with the produce to avoid the contamination of the produce. Then the other implementation point is traceability. Traceability is the ability to identify the origin of food and food ingredients and food sources. And the other term which is used instead of traceability is one step back, one step forward principle. So this system allows an individual or a farmer to document and locate a product through the stages and operations from primary production to consumers. And it also facilitates the identification of cause of non-conformity of a product and improves the ability to withdraw or recall such product to prevent unsafe products reaching the consumer. So these are traceability is mainly talking about the ability uh, to identify the origin of food and feed ingredients and food sources, so that if in case there's a product that has been produced and is unsafe for consumption, that product can be recalled before reaching to the consumers. Food recall and withdrawal management, and how can we do this? We can do this by registering the harvesting date, the type and amount of product loaded, the time and date of loading, the name of the workers loading, persons driving the transport, then the time and date of delivery, name of the person unloading, name and signature of person accepting the delivery. So this registration is very important because it is for a record purpose. It helps in tracing. If in case the food produce is unsafe, it can be traced from where the contamination has taken place, and hence such errors can be avoided in the future from occurring. Then we have to also maintain records of soil and water analysis test results, seed source, quality, date of purchase, certification, and treatment. Then you have to also document sowing dates, varieties, plots, and names of workers sowing or planting. Then you have to also maintain records of fertilizer application and also see applying fertilizers in the previous section. Monitoring and observation records of pests and infestations, recommendation of pesticides application, weed control treatments and sprays done, reasons against which pest, disease, dates and persons spraying both crops and the storage areas. We have to have the record of such for future purposes of traceability. Cleaning and maintenance of programs, calibration records like date of calibration, name of calibration body, date of the next calibration, of the measurement equipment or the sprayers. So that we have come to the points of implementation of good agricultural practices. So we can now discuss about standard operating procedures. When we talk of standard operating procedures, we are looking at a document which describes the regularly occurring operations relevant to the quality of the investigation. So whenever we want to implement good agricultural practices, we have to always make sure that we first develop standard operating procedures which incorporates the step-by-step procedures on how each task is accomplished and includes how tasks will be monitored and corrective and preventive actions are being taken. So the SPOs or the standard operating procedures are very, very important to a farmer because it is a guiding tool or a guiding document that clearly stipulates the step-by-step procedures of implementing good agricultural practices, and also it includes how monitoring is done and then how corrective and preventive actions are being taken in case there's a problem. Then this document describes the regularly recurring operation relevant to the quality of the investigation. The purpose of the standard operating procedure is to carry out operations correctly and always in the same manner. Carry out operation correctly and always in the same manner. So we are using these standard operating procedures in the implementation of good agricultural practices uh, in order to ensure that the good agricultural practices are being implemented correctly and always in the same manner or way. And these standard operating procedures will always be available at the place where the work is being done so that people follow it strictly to ensure the safety of the food that is being produced. Then a standard operating procedure is a compulsory instruction. It's a compulsory instruction. And if deviations from these instructions are allowed, the condition for this will be documented, including who can give permission for this and what exactly the complete procedure will be. So at a farm or an enterprise, you find the standard operating procedure is a compulsory instruction which will be followed by all the workers. And if a worker fails to abide by the standard operating procedures, then the worker stands a chance to be punished. Standard operating procedures aims to achieve efficiency, quality outputs, and uniformity of performance while reducing miscommunication and failure to comply. And with this, come with we have come to the end of our lectures. Uh, catch up. We catch up in the next lecture. Thanks.